Joining us now to discuss these latest developments live is Zachary Marschall, Editor-in-Chief of Campus Reform. Zachary, good to see you. There's been pressure for Shafiq to step down now for months. Why is it happening now?
Yeah, it's great to be here. What we saw is that Shafiq was spending months going back and forth and waffling over her policy that failed to protect Jewish students on campus, and she was trying to hold the support of the trustees together. My instinct, I've been covering this for months as part of Leadership Institute's Campus Reform's coverage. She recently entertained the idea that they would use campus security officers to exact force on students who protested in the fall. I think that was the final nail in the coffin that ended her tenure as president. But the bigger picture right now is that this is the third Ivy League president to resign over this issue. Universities are going into the fall semester completely unprepared to make campus violence any less violent, any less dangerous for students than it was in the spring semester.
I think you make a very interesting point there that these universities are going into the new semester with very little preparation. I've also spoken to parents and students who are college hunting right now. They're really hesitant to apply to these Ivy League schools or other big name schools precisely because of the unrest that they've been seeing over the past few months, over the past year really. They're really worried, but at the same time, these parents want their kids to get the best education. They want them to have the best footing in life. Do these universities recognize this?
I don't think they do. And I've spoken to dozens of parents, students, those who are Jewish, pro-Israel, and what we're seeing is that there's now a ground shift happening. People who are concerned about this issue are starting to reevaluate what makes a good university, what makes an elite university. They're starting to see, equal protection in all cases of discrimination, and also the ability to enforce law and order and respect for American values are what constitute a good university. But people like Shafiq or Claudine Gay or Miguel at UPenn, these are elite university leaders that think that global cosmopolitanism, that anti-Semitism, that anti-American curriculum shows their sophistication, and they've been wrong on that. I think they are completely out of touch with the reality of how dangerous the situation is going to be in the fall, and they're out of touch with average Americans, what they care about in terms of getting a good education.
Yeah, what have you been hearing from these average Americans? What does the atmosphere on these campuses feel like right now for students?
I've spoken to a bunch of students who have been crying in their dorms because they're scared of the people who live down the hall from them, because those people are among the instigators who did the anti-Israel and anti-Semitic protests. I've spoken to students who've told me they just tried to get to class during the tent encampments in the spring, and they were told to go back to Poland, that Hitler was right to gas their ancestors. And these were comments that they heard while they were struggling to get into the buildings. UCLA just got a court order to allow Jewish students into buildings. It is pathetic and embarrassing that our best universities, the universities supposed to lead the world, have to have a judge tell them you're not allowed to have pro-Hamas students block access to class buildings for Jewish students they don't like.
Yeah, you mentioned this hateful speech, these actions that are really scary for students. And we saw these actions and protests spread to schools everywhere. MIT, UCLA, you mentioned Harvard, they even spread across the ocean to Italy, Bangladesh. But now school is starting again very soon. Do you see these protests restarting once students get back to campus?
100% they're going to restart, and we're going to see a tale of two Americas, really. On one hand, you're going to see places like Northwestern University and Rutgers that had very tenuous agreements, and I'm using that term lightly, with these protesters to disband in the spring. But those agreements are going to fall apart. Even at Brown University, they're going to hold a vote this fall to think about divesting from Israel. If those measures don't go the way the students want, we can expect more violence and more extreme violence. But then on the other hand, we also have places like University of Florida, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, that took a firm stand against these types of protests and used law enforcement quickly and appropriately to quell disruptive activism. And I think we're going to see, in the South at big state universities with high commuter populations, more normalcy, of greater respect for law and order, and a greater respect for, diversity and tolerance for people who have different religious or ethnic identities.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. And just to wrap up, this really is a balancing act for schools. On the one hand, universities have to ensure students have their freedom of speech, but at the same time, they have to ensure that these destructive behaviors don't keep happening. So what can they do in that situation to balance that?
Well, what's the most frustrating thing about this entire situation is that there's very little new that needs to be done to have prevented any of this from happening last year. The biggest thing that needs to be done is very simple, and that is just enforce existing code of conduct and anti-discrimination policies that are on the books already equally to all in all cases of racism or ethnic or religious-based discrimination. Universities chose not to do that, and I applaud the new laws and regulations we're seeing, especially coming out of Ohio, that are now forcing public and private universities there to expand anti-discrimination policies to include the types of anti-Semitism we saw last year that President Shafik herself admitted during her congressional testimony Columbia was unprepared for, and they did not know how to handle it. So that's the challenge. Have these universities done the work over the summer to use and enforce these policies correctly in the fall?
Well, here's to hoping that this is a peaceful upcoming school year. Zachary Marschall, Editor-in-Chief of Campus Reform, thank you.
Thank you.